All right. So, yo, peace, light and love. I'm gonna start saying if you like the information that I'm sharing, if you kind of enjoying the conversation, like and subscribe. Let's go ahead and get the video channels and the video views and the channel subscribers up, so more information can get out and just more people could be talking about the information that I'm sharing. So today the conversation is going to be did the people who wrote the Bible use Herodotus as inspiration? And it's going to be looking at some similarities between the biblical story of Joseph and Cyrus. So Joseph found in the Bible, and then Cyrus found in Herodotus histories, right? Now, this is going to be a long video because I'm just going to go and recount both stories and then do a compare and contrast because most of us have heard, most of us know the story of Joseph, like, especially if you are initiated into the Western civilization. Not many of us know the story of Cyrus. So, and then when I first read this comparison, and I looked at it, it wasn't even a full page. Well, it was a full page. Yeah, it was a page and a quarter as far as like the information that the author was sharing to come to this conclusion. And then I looked further online and saw, less and less information about the life of Cyrus. And then I'm looking and I'm like, just looking at the information provided in the person's book wasn't enough for me. He is clearly talking almost to colleagues, other people that have read the stories almost. And so, just to satisfy my own curiosity to see if I could come to the same conclusion, I did the same thing. I went ahead. My references are up top. It's Perseus. I went ahead on Perseus and went through the whole story. And then what took me so long is I illustrated the entire story as best as I could. So this I've been working on this project for a little while. I hope you enjoy it. We'll look and see if we can come to the same conclusions that this other author did. And then, let me jump right into it, right? So this is the hidden secrets of the Bible, Herodotus and Joseph the Dreamer, right? So the discussion is that the authors used Herodotus to compose the story of Joseph, mimicking it from Cyrus. So we're looking at actually two. We think we're looking at two people, but we're really looking at the same person. Joseph and Cyrus are the same person. And so this presentation is going to seek to show that, right? So Cyrus, let's look at how it goes. Okay, this is from Perseus Tufts, book one, right? There's something wrong with this video joint that's going on here. So hope you can appreciate that. Sorry, I'm not appreciate it, but know it. All right. Afterwards, Cyaxares died after a reign of 40 years, and his son Astyages inherited the sovereignty. Astyages had a daughter, whom he called Mandane. He dreamed that she urinated so much that she filled his city and flooded all of Asia. He communicated this vision to those of the Magi who interpreted dreams. And when he had heard what they told him, he was terrified. And presently, when Mandane was of marriageable age, he feared the vision too much to give her any meed worthy to marry into his family, but married her to a Persian called Cambyses, a man whom he knew to be well born and of a quiet temper. For Astyages held Cambyses to be much lower than a Mede of middle rank. But during the first year that Mandane was married to Cambyses, Astyages saw a second vision. He dreamed that a vine grew out of the genitals of his daughter and that the vine covered the whole of Asia. Having seen this vision and communicated it to the interpreters of dreams, he sent to the Persians for his daughter, who was about to give birth, when she arrived. And when she arrived, kept her guarded, meaning to kill whatever child she bore. For the interpreters declared that the meaning of his dream was that his daughter's offspring would rule in his place. Anxious to prevent this, Astyages, when Cyrus was born, summoned Harpagus, a man of his household, who was his most faithful servant among the Medes and was administrator of all that was his. And he said, Anx- oh, the child was given to Harpagus, and he went to his house weeping when he came in. He told his wife the entire speech uttered by Astyages. Now then, she said to him, what do you propose to do? He said, not to obey Astyages' instructions. He answered, not even if he should lose his mind and be more frantic than he is now. I will not lend myself to his plan or be an accessory to such a murder. There are many reasons why I will not kill him, because the child is related to me, and because Astyages is old and has no male children. Now, if the sovereignty passes to this daughter of his after his death, whose son is he now, killing by means of me? What is left for me but the gravest of all dangers? For the sake of my safety, this child has to die, but one of Astyages' own people has to be the murderer, not one of mine. So saying, he sent a messenger at once to one of Astyages' cowherds, who he knew pastured his herds in the likeliest spots, and where the mountains were most infested with wild beasts. The man's name was Mithridates, and his wife was a slave like him. Her name was in the Greek language Sino, in the Median Spako, for spakes is the Median word for dog. The foothills of the mountains where this cowherd pastured his cattle are north of Ecbatania, towards the Euxine Sea. For the rest of Media is everywhere a level plain, but here on the side of the Saspores, the land is very high and mountainous. So when the cowherd came in haste at the summons, Harpagus said, Astyages wants you to take Astyages wants you to take this child and leave it in the most desolate part of the mountains so that it will perish as quickly as possible. And he wants me to tell you that if you do not kill it, but preserve it somehow, you will undergo the most harrowing death, and I am ordered to see it exposed. Hearing this, the cowherd took the child and went back the same way and came to his dwelling. Now, as it happened, his wife too had been on the verge of delivering every day. And as the divinity would have it, she did in fact give birth. While the cowherd was away in the city, each of them was anxious for the other, the husband being afraid about his wife's labor, and the wife because she did not know why Harpagus had so unexpectedly sent for her husband. So when he returned and stood before her, she was startled by the unexpected sight and asked him before he could speak why Harpagus had so insistently summoned him. Wife, he said, when I came to the city, I saw and heard what I ought never to have seen and what ought never to have happened to our masters. Harpagus's whole house was full of weeping. Astonished, I went in, and immediately I saw a child laying there struggling and crying, adorned in gold and embroidered clothing. And when and when Harpagus saw me, he told me to take the child in haste and bring it away and leave it where the mountains are most infested with wild beasts. It was Astyages, he said, who enjoined this on me, and Harpagus threatened me grievously if I did not do it. So I took him and brought him away, supposing him to be the child of one of the servants, for I could never have guessed whose he was. But I was amazed at seeing him adorned with golden clothing. And at hearing too the evident sound of weeping in the house of Harpagus. Very soon on the way, I learned the whole story from the servant who brought me out of the city and gave the child into my custody, namely, that it was the son of Mandane, the king's daughter, and Cambius, the son of Cyrus, and that Astyages gave the command to kill him, and now here he is. And as he said this, the cowherd uncovered it and showed it. But when the woman saw how fine and fair the child was, she began to cry and laid hold of the man's knees and begged him by no means to expose him. But the husband said he could not do otherwise. For, he said, spies would be coming from Harpagus to see what was done, and he would have to die a terrible death if he did not obey. Take this one and put it out. But the child of the daughter Astyages, let us raise it as if it were our own. This way you won't be caught disobeying our masters, and we will not have plotted badly. For the dead child, because she had a child that was dead. For the dead child will have the royal burial, and the living will not lose his life. Being unable to move her husband, the woman then said, since I cannot convince you not to expose it, then if a child has to be seen, expose this, showing him her dead child. Thinking that his wife advised him excellently in his present strait, the cowherd immediately did as she said. He gave his wife the child whom he had brought to kill, and his own dead child he put into the chest in which he carried the other, and dressed it with all the other child's finery, and left it out in the most desolate part of the mountains. Then on the third day, after leaving the child out, the cowherd left one of his herdsmen to watch it, and went to the city, where he went to Harpagus' house, and said he was ready to show the child's dead body. Harpagus sent the most trusted of his bodyguard, and these saw for him and buried the cowherd's child. So it was buried, and the cowherd's wife kept and raised the boy, who was afterwards named Cyrus. But she did not give him that name, but another name. Now, when the boy was 10 years old, the truth about him was revealed in such a way as this. He was playing in the village where these herdsmen's quarters were, playing in the road with others of his age. The boys, while playing, chose to be their king, this one, who was supposed to be the son of the cowherd. Then this son of the cowherd assigned some of them to the building of houses, some to be his bodyguard, one doubtless to be the king's eye, to another he gave the right of bringing him messages. To each he gave his proper work. Now one of these boys playing with him was the son of Artambares, a notable Mede. When he did not perform his assignment from Cyrus, Cyrus told the other boys to seize him, and when they did so, he handled the boy very roughly and whipped him. As soon as he was let go, very upset about the indignity he had suffered, he went down to his father in the city and complained of what he had received at the hands of the son of Astyages, cowherd, not calling him Cyrus, for that name had not yet been given. Artambares, going just as angry as he was to Astyages, and bringing his son along, announced that an impropriety had been committed, saying, O king, By your slave, the son of a cowherd, we have been outraged thus. And with that he bared his son's shoulders. When Astyages heard and saw, he was ready to avenge the boy in view of Artamber's rank. So he sent for the cowherd and his son. When they were both present, Astyages said, fixing his eyes on Cyrus, "Is it you then, the child of one such as this, who have dared to lay hands on the son of the greatest of my courtiers?" Cyrus answered, "Master, what I did to him I did with justice. The boys of the village of whom he was one chose me, while playing to be their king, for they thought me the most fit for this. The other boys then did as assigned, but this one was disobedient and cared nothing for me, for which he got what he deserved. Now, if I deserve punishment for this, here I am to take it." While the boy spoke, it seemed to Astyages that he recognized him. The character of his face was like his own, he thought, and his manner of answering was freer than customary, and the date of the exposure seemed to agree with the boy's age. Astonished at this, he sat a while silent. But when at last with difficulty he could collect his wits, he said, for he wanted to be rid of Artamberes and question the cowherd with no one present, "I shall act in such a way, Artamberes, that you and your son shall have no cause of complaint." So he sent Artamberes away, and the attendants led Cyrus inside at Astyages' bidding. When the cowherd was left quite alone, Astyages asked him where he had got the boy and who had been the giver. The cowherd answered that Cyrus was his own son and that the mother was still with him. Astyages said that he was not well advised if he wished to find himself in a desperate situation, and as he said this, made a sign to the spear bearers to seize him. Then, under stress of necessity, the cowherd disclosed to him the whole story, telling everything exactly as it happened from the beginning, and at the end fell to entreaty and urged the king to pardon him. When the cowherd had disclosed the true story, Astyages took less interest in him, but he was very angry with Harpagus and had the guards summon him. Harpagus came, and Astyages asked him, "Harpagus, how did you kill the boy, my daughter's son, whom I gave you?" Harpagus, when he saw the cowherd was there, did not take the way of falsehood, lest he be caught and confuted. "O king," he said, "when I took the boy, I thought and considered how to do what you wanted and not be held a murderer by your daughter or by you, even though I was blameless towards you. So I did this. I summoned this cowherd here and gave the child to him, telling him that it was you who gave the command to kill it. And that was the truth, for such was your command. But I gave the child with the instructions that the cowherd was to lay it on a desolate mountainside and wait there and watch until it was dead. And I threatened all sorts of things if he did not accomplish this. Then, when he had done what he was told, and the child was dead, I sent the most trusted of my eunuchs and had the body viewed and buried. This, O king, is the story, and such was the end of the boy." Harpagus told the story straight, while Astyages, hiding the anger that he felt against him for what had been done, first repeated the story again to Harpagus exactly as he had heard it from the cowherd. Then, after repeating it, ended by saying that the boy was alive and that the matter had turned out well. "For," he said, "I was greatly affected by what had been done to this boy, and it weighed heavily on me that I was estranged from my daughter. Now then, in this good turn of fortune, send your own son to this boy newly come. And since I am about to sacrifice for the boy's safety to the gods to whom this honor is due, come here to dine with me." When Harpagus heard this,
He bowed and went to his home, very pleased to find that his offense had turned out for the best and that he was invited to dinner in honor of this fortunate day. Coming in, he told his only son, a boy of about 13 years of age, to go to Astyages' palace and do whatever the king commanded. And in his great joy, he told his wife everything that had happened. But when Harpagus' son came, Astyages cut his throat and tore him limb from limb, roasted some of the flesh and boiled some, and kept it ready after he had it prepared. So when the hour for dinner came, and the rest of the guests and Harpagus were present, Astyages and the others were served dishes of lamb's meat. But Harpagus, that of his own son, all but the head and hands and feet, which lay apart, covered up in a wicker basket. And when Harpagus seemed to have eaten his fill, Astyages asked him, "Did you like your meal, Harpagus?" "Exceedingly," Harpagus answered. Then those whose job it was brought him the head of his son and hands and feet concealed in the basket, and they stood before Harpagus and told him to open and take whatever he liked. Harpagus did. He opened and saw what was left of his son. He saw this, but mastered himself and did not lose his composure. Astyages asked him, "Do you know what beast's meat you have eaten?" "I know," he said, "and all that the king does is pleasing." With that answer, he took the remains of the meat and went home. There he meant, I suppose, after collecting everything, to bury it. Thus, Astyages punished Harpagus, but to help him to decide about Cyrus, he summoned the same magi who had interpreted his dream, as I have said. And when they came, Astyages asked them how they had interpreted his dream. They answered as before and said that the boy must have been made king had he lived and not died first. Then Astyages said, "The boy is safe and alive. And when he was living in the country, the boys of his village made him king. And he duly did all that is done by true kings. For he signed to each individually the roles of bodyguards and sentinels and messengers and everything else, and so ruled. And what do you think is the significance of this?" "If the boy is alive," said the Magi, "and has been made king without premeditation, then be confident on this score and keep an untroubled heart. He will not be made king a second time. Even in our prophecies, it is often but a small thing that has been foretold, and the consequences of dreams come to nothing in the end." "I too, Magi," said Astyages, "am very much of your opinion, that the dream came true when the boy was called king, and that I have no more to fear from him. Nevertheless, consider well and advise me what will be the safest, both for my house and for you." The Magi said, "O king, we too are very anxious that your sovereignty prosper, for otherwise it passes from your nation to this boy who was a Persian. And so we Medes are enslaved and held of no account by the Persians, as we are of another blood. But while you, our countrymen, are established king, we have our share of power, and great honor is shown us by you. Thus, then, we ought by all means to watch out for you and your sovereignty. And if at the present time we saw any danger, we would declare everything to you. But now the dream has had a trifling conclusion, and we ourselves are confident and advise you to be so also. As for this boy, send him out of your sight to the Persians and his parents." Hearing this, Astyages was glad, and calling Cyrus said, "My boy, I did you wrong because of a vision I had in a dream that meant nothing. But by your own destiny, you still live. Now, therefore, go to the Persians, and good luck go with you. I will send guides with you. When you get there, you will find a father and mother, unlike the cowherd Mithridates and his wife." After saying this, Astyages sent Cyrus away. When he returned to Cambyses' house, his parents received him there, And learning who he was, they welcomed him enthusiastically, for they had supposed that long ago he had been killed. And they asked him how his life had been saved. Then he told them and said that until now he had known nothing but been very deceived, but that on the way he had heard the whole story of his misfortune. For he had thought, he said, that Astyages' cowherd was his father. But in his journey from the city, his escort had told him the whole story. And he had been raised, he said, by the cowherd's wife, and he was full of her praises. And in his tale, he was constantly speaking of Sino. Hearing this, his parents circulated a story that Cyrus was suckled by a dog when exposed, thinking in this way to make the story of his salvation seem more marvelous to the Persians. This then was the beginning of that legend, but as Cyrus grew up to be the manliest and best loved of his peers, Harpagus courted him and sent him gifts, wishing to be avenged on Astyages. For he saw no hope for a private man like himself of punishing Astyages. But as he saw Cyrus growing up, he tried to make him an ally, for he likened Cyrus' misfortune to his own. Even before this, the following had been done by him. Since Astyages was harsh towards the Medes, he associated with each of the chief Medes and persuaded them to make Cyrus their leader and dispose of Astyages. He carefully slit the belly of a hare, and leaving it as it was without further harm, he put into it a paper on which he wrote what he thought best. Then he sewed up the hare's belly and sent it to Persia by the most trusted of his servants, giving him nets to carry as if he were a huntsman. The messenger was instructed to give Cyrus the hare and tell him by word of mouth to cut it open with his own hands, with no one else present. All this was done. Cyrus took the hare and slit it and read the paper which was in it, and the writing was as follows: Son of Cambyses, since the gods watch over you, avenge yourself now on Astyages, your murderer. For thanks to his intention, you are dead, while thanks to the gods and me, you live. I expect that long ago you heard the story of what was done concerning you, and how Astyages treated me because I did not kill you, but gave you to the cowherd. If then you will listen to me, you shall rule all the country, which is now ruled by Astyages. Persuade the Persians to rebel and lead their army against the Medes. Then you will have your wish, whether I am appointed to command the army against you or some other notable man among the Medes, for they will of themselves revolt from Astyages and join you and try to pull him down. Seeing then that all is ready here, do as I say and do it quickly. When Cyrus read this, he deliberated as to what was the shrewdest way to persuade the Persians to revolt, and what he thought to be most effective, he did. Writing what he liked on a paper, he assembled the Persians and then unfolded the paper and declared that in it Astyages appointed him leader of the Persian armies. Now he said in his speech, I command you, men of Persia, to come, each provided with a sickle. This is what Cyrus said. Now there are many tribes in Persia. Those of them that Cyrus assembled and persuaded to revolt from the Medes were the Parsagadi, the Marphai, and the Masphai. On these, all other Persians depend. The chief tribe is that of the Parsagadi. To them belongs the clan of the Achaemeni, the royal house of Persia. The other Persian tribes are the Panthelio and the Durcio and the Germani, all tillers of the soil, and the Dai, the Mardai, the Draupadi, the Sargatai, all wandering herdsmen. Hold up, let me count how many that is. I didn't do that before. Those three. Then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7. So 10? 10 tribes? So when they all came with sickles as ordered, Cyrus commanded them to reclaim in one day a thorny tract of Persia of 2¼ or 2½ miles each way in extent. The Persians accomplished the task appointed. Cyrus then commanded them to wash themselves and come the next day. Meanwhile, collecting his father's goats and sheep and oxen in one place, he slaughtered and prepared them as a feast for the Persian host, providing also wine and all the foods that were the most suitable. When the Persians came on the next day, he had them sit and feast in a meadow after dinner. He asked them which they liked more, their task of yesterday or their present pastime. They answered that the difference was great. All yesterday they had nothing but evil. Today, nothing but good. Then, taking their word, Cyrus laid bare his whole purpose and said, "This is your situation. Men of Persia, obey me, and you shall have these good things, and 10,000 others, besides, with no toil and slavery. But if you will not obey me, you will have labors unnumbered, like your toil of yesterday." The Persians had long been discontent with the Medes, that the Medes ruled them. And now, having got a champion, they were glad to win their freedom. But when Astyages heard that Cyrus was about this business, he sent a messenger to summon him. Cyrus told the messenger to take back word that Astyages would see him sooner than he liked. Hearing this, Astyages armed all his Medes and was distracted by Providence so that he forgot what he had done to Harpagus and appointed Harpagus to lead the army. So when the Medes marched out and engaged with the Persians, those who were not in on the plan fought, while others deserted to the enemy, and most were deliberate cowards and ran. Thus the Median army was shamefully scattered. As soon as Astyages heard, he sent a threatening message to Cyrus. Nevertheless, Cyrus shall not rejoice. And with that, he took the Magi who interpreted the dreams, who had persuaded him to let Cyrus go free, and impaled them. Then he armed the Medes who were left in the city, the very young and the very old men, leading these out and engaging the Persians. He was beaten, of course. Astyages himself was taken prisoner and lost the Median army which he led. When Astyages was captive, Harpagus came and exulted over him and taunted him, and besides much other bitter mockery, he recalled his banquet, when Astyages had fed Harpagus his son's flesh, and asked Astyages what it was like to be a slave after having been a king. Fixing his gaze on Harpagus, Astyages asked, "Do you imagine that this which Cyrus has done is your work?" "It was I," said the other, "who wrote the letter. The accomplishment of the work is rightly mine." "Then," said Astyages, "you stand confessed, the most foolish and most unjust man on earth, most foolish in giving another the throne which you might have had for yourself. If the present business is indeed your doing, most unjust in enslaving the Medes because of that banquet. For if in any event another and not you had to possess the royal power, then in justice some Mede should have it, not a Persian. But now you have made the Medes, who did you no harm, slaves instead of masters, and the Persians, who were the slaves, are now the masters of the Medes." Thus Astyages was deposed from his sovereignty after a reign of 35 years, and the Medes had to bow down before the Persians because of Astyages' cruelty. They had ruled all Asia beyond the Hylaeus for 128 years, from which must be subtracted the time when the Scythians held sway. At a later time, they repented of what they now did, and rebelled against Darius. But they were defeated in battle and brought back into subjection. But now, in Astyages' time, Cyrus and the Persians rose in revolt against the Medes, and from this time ruled Asia. As for Astyages, Cyrus did him no further harm and kept him in his own house until Astyages died. This is the story of the birth and upbringing of Cyrus, and of how he became king. And afterwards, as I have already related, he subjugated Croesus in punishment for the unprovoked wrong done him. And after his victory, he became sovereign of all of Asia. All right. So that was the story of Cyrus, right? So now let's compare it with Joseph's story, which was really kind of interesting to me because I didn't know that Joseph's story, had certain elements in it. So, but let's begin, right? Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob's family line. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah, the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made an ornate robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down." His brothers said to him, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. "Listen," he said, "I had another dream, and this time the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." When he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the peace. Now his brothers had gone to graze their father's flocks near Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, "As you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. Come, I am going to send you to them." "Very well," he replied. So he said to him, "Go and see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks, and bring word back to me." Then he sent him off from the valley of Hebron. When Joseph arrived at Shechem, a man found him wandering around in the fields and asked him, "What are you looking for?" He replied, "I'm looking for my brothers. Can you tell me where they are grazing their flocks?" "They have moved on from here," the man answered. "I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. Now his brothers had gone to graze their father's flocks near Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, "As you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. Come, I am going to send you to them." The brothers said, "Here comes that dreamer." They said to each other, "Oh man, come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." When Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. "Let's not take his life," he said. "Don't shed any blood. Throw him into this cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him." Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty, there was no water in it. As they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." His brothers agreed. So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver, to the Ishmaelites who took him to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the cistern and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes. He went back to his brothers and said, "The boy isn't there. Where can I turn now?" Then they got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped the robe in blood. They took the ornate robe back to their father and said, "We found this. Examine it to see whether it is your son's robe." He recognized it and said, "It is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. "No," he said, "I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave." So his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, one of the Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. Oh, yeah, this is what people say. So in the previous verse, it said the Midianites took Joseph to Egypt. And all of a sudden now, the Ishmaelites brought him there. So are the Midianites and the Ishmaelites the same people? Interesting. The Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. From the time he put him in charge of his household and all of that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Now Joseph was well built and handsome. And after a while, his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, "Come to bed with me." But he refused. "With me in charge," he told her, "my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns, he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master's withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her. See, I think this part of the story is more in line with the tale of the two brothers, where Bata refuses the advances of his brother's wife, which is like in the same vein and has the same almost conversation as this one. But this author says it's more closely related to the story of Cyrus. So let's move further on in the story to see what's going on. Okay. One day he went into the house to attend to his duties, and none of the household servants were inside. She caught him by his cloak and said, "Come to bed with me." But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. When she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and had run out of the house, she called her household servants. "Look," she said to them, "this Hebrew has been brought to us to make sport of us. He came in here to sleep with me, but I screamed. When he heard the scream, when he heard me scream for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house." She kept his cloak beside her until his master came home. Then she told him this story. "That Hebrew slave you brought us came to me to make sport of me. But as soon as I screamed for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house." When his master heard the story, his wife told him, saying, "This is how your slave treated me." He burned with anger. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. But while Joseph was there in prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison. and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. Sometime later, Sometime later, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their master, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with his two officials and put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the same prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard assigned to them Joseph, and he attended them. After they had been in custody for some time, each of the two men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were being held in prison, had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. When Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw that they were dejected, and so he asked Pharaoh's officials, who were in custody with him in his master's house, "Why do you look so sad today?" "We both had dreams," they answered, "but there is no one to interpret them." Then Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." So the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream. He said to him, "In my dream, I saw a vine in front of me, and on the vine were three branches. As soon as it budded, it blossomed, and its clusters ripened to grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and put the cup in his hand." "This is what it means," Joseph said to him. "The three branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you used to do when you were his cupbearer. But when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. I was forcefully carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing to deserve being put in a dungeon." When the chief baker saw that Joseph had given a favorable interpretation, he said to Joseph, "I too had a dream. On my head were three baskets of bread. In the top baskets were all kind of baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating out of them, out of the basket on my head." "This is what it means," Joseph said. "The three baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head and impale your body on a pole, and the birds will eat away your flesh." Now the third day was Pharaoh's birthday, and he gave a feast for all his officials. He lifted up the heads of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker on the presence of his officials. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position so that he once again put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he impaled the chief baker, just as Joseph had said to them in his interpretation. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph, and he forgot him. When 2 full years had passed, Pharaoh had a dream. He was standing by the Nile when out of the river there came up 7 cows, sleek and fat, and they grazed among the reeds. After them, 7 other cows, ugly and gaunt, came up out of the Nile and stood beside those on the river bank. And the cows that were ugly and gaunt ate up the 7 sleek fat cows. Then Pharaoh woke up. He fell asleep again and had a second dream. 7 heads of grain, healthy and good, were growing on a single stalk. After them, 7 other heads of grain sprouted, thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 healthy full heads. Then Pharaoh woke up. It had been a dream. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, "Today I'm reminded of my shortcomings. Pharaoh was once angry with his servants, and he imprisoned me and the chief baker in the house of the captain of the guards. Each of us had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. Now a young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretation of his dream. And things turned out exactly as he interpreted them. I was restored to my position, and the other man was impaled." So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. And he had shaved and changed his clothes, and he came before Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I had a dream, and no one can interpret it. But I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it." "I cannot do it," Joseph replied. but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, in my dream, I was standing on the bank of the Nile. When out of the river there came up 7 cows, fat and sleek. Well, he recounted the dream to Joseph. Joseph said to Pharaoh, the dreams of the Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh that he has brought what he's about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads of grain are 7 years. It is one and the same. The 7 lean and ugly cows are 7 years. It is just as I said to Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what to do, he's about to do. 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout the land of Egypt, but 7 years of famine will follow. Then all the abundance of Egypt will be forgotten, and the famine will ravage the land. The abundance in the land will not be remembered because the famine that follows will be so severe. The reason the dream was given to Pharaoh in two forms is that the matter has been firmly decided by God, and God will do it soon. And now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take a fifth of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of these good years that are coming up and store up the grain under the authority of the Pharaoh and keep to be kept in the cities for food. This food should be held in reserve for the country to be used during the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so that the country may not be ruined. The plan seemed good to all his officials. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, God has made all this known to you. There is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, I thereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his finger and put it on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in robes of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. He had him ride a chariot and second in command, and people shouted before him. Thus he put him in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, but without your word, no one will lift a hand or foot in all of Egypt. So basically, this is wild. Pharaoh gave Joseph the name Zapathaneth Paneah and gave him Asenath, daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, to be his wife. And Joseph went throughout the land of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of the Pharaoh of Egypt, and Joseph went out from Pharaoh's presence and traveled throughout Egypt. During the 7 years of abundance, the land produced plentifully. Joseph collected all the food in those 7 years of abundance in Egypt and stored it in the cities. In each city, he put the food grown in the fields surrounding it. Joseph stored up huge quantities of grain like the sand of the sea. It was so much that he stopped keeping records because it was too much. Before the years of famine came, 2 sons were born to Joseph by Asenath. Joseph named his firstborn Manasseh and said it was because God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household. The second son was Ephraim, and it is because God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering. The 7 years of abundance came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph had said. There was famine in all other lands, but in the whole land of Egypt there was food. When all Egypt began to feel the famine, the people cried to Pharaoh for food. The Pharaoh told all the Egyptians, go to Joseph and do what he tells you. When the famine had spread over the whole country, Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe throughout Egypt. And all the world came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was severe. Before the years of famine came to an before two came when Jacob learned that there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, why do you just keep looking at each other? I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us, so that we may live and not die. Then 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain from Egypt. But Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with the others because he was afraid that harm might come to him. So Israel's sons were among those who went to buy grain. for there was famine in the land of Canaan. And now Joseph was the governor of the land, the person who sold grain to all his people. So when Joseph's brothers arrived, they bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. As soon as Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them, but he pretended to be a stranger and spoke harshly to them. Where do you come from? He asked. From the land of Canaan, they replied, to buy food. Although Joseph recognized his brothers, they did not recognize him. Then he remembered his dreams about them and said to them, You are spies. You have come to see where our land is unprotected. No, my lord, they answered. Your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. Your servants are honest men, not spies. No, he said to them, You have come to see where our land is unprotected. But they replied, Your servants were 12 brothers, the sons of one man who lives in the land of Canaan. The youngest is now with our father, and one is no more. Joseph said to them, It is just as I had told you. You are spies, and this is how you will be tested. As surely as Pharaoh lives, you will not leave this place unless your youngest comes here. Send one of your number to get your brother. The rest of you will be kept in prison, so that your words may be tested to see if you are telling the truth. If you are not, then as surely as Pharaoh lives, you are spies. And he put them all in custody for 3 days. On the third day, Joseph said to them, Do this and you will live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers stay here in prison, while the rest of you go and take grain back for your starving households. But if you must bring your youngest, but you must bring your youngest brother, so that your words may be verified, and that you may not die. This they proceeded to do. They said to one another, Surely we are being punished because of our brother. We saw how distressed he was when he pleaded with us for his life, but we would not listen. That's why this distress has come on. Reuben replied, Didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? But you would not listen. Now we must give an accounting for his blood. They did not realize that Joseph could understand them since he was using an interpreter. He turned away from them and began to weep, but then came back and spoke to them again. He had Simeon taken from them and bound before their eyes. And Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain, to put each man's silver back in his sack, and to give them provisions for their journey. After this was done for them, they loaded their grain on their donkeys and left. At the place where they stopped for the night, one of them opened his sack to get feed for his donkey, and he saw his silver in the mouth of his sack. My silver has been returned, he said to his brothers. Here it is in my sack. Their hearts sank, and they turned to each other trembling, and said, What is this that God has done to us? When they came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan, they told him all that had happened to them. They said, The man who is Lord over the land spoke harshly to us and treated us as though we were spying on the land. But we said to him, We are honest men, we are not spies. We were 12 brothers, sons of one father. One is no more, the youngest is now with our father in Canaan. Then the man who was Lord over the land said to us, This is how I will know whether you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers here with me and take food for your starving households. But bring your youngest brother to me, so that I will know that you are not spies, but honest men. Then I will give your brother back to you and can trade in the land. As they were emptying their sacks, there in each man's sack was his pouch of silver. When they and their father saw the money pouches, they were frightened. Their father Jacob said to them, You have deprived me of my children. Joseph is no more, Simeon is no more, and now you want to take Benjamin. Everything is against me. Then Reuben said to his father, You may put both of my sons to death if I do not bring him back to you. Entrust him to my care, and I will bring him back. But Jacob said, My son will not go with you down there. His brother is dead, and he is the only one left. If harm comes to him on that journey you are taking. Now famine was still severe in the land, so when they had eaten all the grain they had brought from Egypt, their father said to them, Go back and buy us a little more food. But Judah said to him, the man warned us solemnly, you will not see my face again unless your brother is with you. If you will send our brother with us, we will go down and buy the food. But if you will not send him, we will not go down, because the man said to us, you will not see my face again unless your brother is with you. Israel asked, why did you bring this trouble on me, telling the man you had another brother? They replied, the man questioned us closely about ourselves and our family. Is your father still living? He asked. Do you have another brother? We simply answered his questions. How were we to know? He would say, bring your brother down here. Then Judah said to Israel, his father, send the boy along with me, and we will go at once, so that we and you and our children may live and not die. I myself will guarantee his safety. You can hold me personally responsible for him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him here before you, I will bear the blame before you all my life. As it is, if we had not delayed, we could have gone and returned twice. So they just left Simeon in jail. They were like, I'm done with this part. This is a long presentation. Then their father Israel said to them, if it must be, then do this. Put some of the best products of the land in your bags and take them down to the man as a gift. A little balm and a little honey and some spices and myrrh, some pistachio nuts and almonds. Take double the amount of silver with you, for you must return the silver that was put back into the mouths of your sacks. Perhaps it was a mistake. Take your brother also and go back to that man at once. And may God Almighty grant you mercy before the man, so that he will let your other brother in Benjamin, come back. As for me, if I am bereaved, I am bereaved. So the men took the gifts and doubled the amount of silver, and Benjamin also. They hurried down to Egypt and presented themselves to Joseph. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the steward of his house, take these men to my house, slaughter an animal, and prepare a meal. They are to eat with me at noon. The man did as Joseph had told him and took the men to Joseph's house. Now the men were frightened when they were taken to his house. They thought, we were brought here because the silver that was put back into our sacks the first time, he wants to attack us and overpower us and seize us as slaves and take our donkeys. So they went up to Joseph's steward and spoke to him at the entrance. We beg our pardon, our lord, they said. We came down here the first time to buy food. But at the place we were stopped for the night, we opened our sacks, and each of us found his silver, the exact weight, in the mouth of his sack. So we have brought it back with us. We have also brought additional silver with us to buy food. It's all right, he said. Don't be afraid. Your God, the God of your father, has given you treasure in your sacks. I received your silver. I received your silver. Then he brought Simeon out to them. The steward took the men into the house, gave them water to wash their feet, and provided fodder for their donkey. They prepared their gifts for Joseph's arrival at noon, because they had heard that they were to eat there. When Joseph came home, they presented to him the gifts they had brought into the house. And they bowed down before him to the ground. And he asked them how they were. And then he said, how is your aged father you told me about? Is he still living? They replied, your servant, our father is still alive and well. And they bowed down, prostrating themselves before him. As he looked about and saw his brother Benjamin, his own mother's son, he asked, is this your youngest brother, the one you had told me about? And he said, God be gracious to you, my son. Deeply moved at the sight of his brother, Joseph hurried and looked for a place to weep. He went into his private room and wept there. After he had washed his face, he came out, controlling himself, served the food. They served him by himself, and the brothers by themselves, and the Egyptians who ate with him by themselves, because Egyptians cannot eat with Hebrews, for that is detestable to the Egyptians. That's an interesting statement. Why would the Egyptians at this stage be detest Hebrews? Like that doesn't make sense right now. I think they're appealing to some sort of cultural thing because at this time they don't even know about the Hebrews unless they're saying it's a general custom for the Egyptians to not want to eat with anybody of a foreign nation. But that's weird because at the moment, Joseph, they know that Joseph is a Hebrew. This is a weird part of the story, honestly. Now Joseph gave these instructions to the steward of his house. Fill the men's sack with as much food as you can carry, and put each man's silver in the mouth of his sack. Then put my cup in the silver one in the mouth of the youngest one's sack, along with silver for his grain. And he did as Joseph said. As morning dawned, the men were sent on their way with their donkeys. They had not gone far from the city when Joseph said to his steward, go after those men at once. And when you catch up with them, say, why have you repaid good with evil? Isn't this the cup my master drinks from and also uses for divination? This is a wicked thing you have done. When he caught up with them, he repeated these words to them. But they said to him, why does my Lord say such things? Far be it from your servants to do anything like that. We even brought back to you from the land of Canaan the silver we found inside the mouths of our sacks. So why would we steal silver or gold from your master's house? Very well, then, he said, let it be as you say. Whoever is found to have it will become my slave. The rest of you will be free from blame. Each of them quickly lowered his sack to the ground and opened it. Then the steward proceeded to search, beginning with the oldest and ending with the youngest. And the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. At this, they tore their clothes. Then they all loaded their donkeys and left. Joseph was still in the house when Judah and his brothers came in, and they threw themselves to the ground before him. Joseph said to them, what is this that you have done? Don't you know that a man like me can find things out by divination? What can we say, my lord? Judah replied. What can we say? How can we prove our innocence? God has uncovered your servant's guilt. We are now my lord's slaves. We ourselves and the one who was found to have the cup. But Joseph said, far be it from me to do such a thing. Only the man who was found to have the cup will become my slave. The rest of you will go back to the father in peace. Then Judah went up to him and said, pardon your servant, my lord. Let me speak a word to my lord. Do not be angry with your servant, though you are equal to Pharaoh himself. My lord asked his servants, do you have a father or a brother? And we answered, we have an aged father, and there's a young son born to him in his old age. His brother is dead, and he is the only one of his mother's son left. Then you said, bring your servants, bring him down to me so I can see him for myself. And we said to my lord, the boy cannot leave his father. If he leaves him, his father will die. But you told your servants, unless your youngest brother comes down with you, you will not see my face again. So they basically just recounted the story to Joseph. After the recounting of the story, Joseph could no longer control himself before all his attendants, and he cried, have everyone leave my presence. So there was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard him, and Pharaoh's household heard about it. I am Joseph. Is my father still living? But his brothers were not able to answer him because they were terrified at his presence. Then Joseph said to his brothers, come close to me. When they had done so, he said, I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now there has been famine in the land, and for the next 5 years there will be no plowing and reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to reserve for you a remnant on earth and save your lives by a great deliverance. So then it was not you who sent me here, but God. He made me father to Pharaoh lord of his entire household and ruler of all of Egypt. Now hurry back to my father and say to him that this is what your son Joseph said. God has made me lord of all Egypt. Come down with me and don't delay. You shall live in the region of Goshen and be near me. You and your children and grandchildren, your flocks and herds, and all you have. I will provide for you because 5 years of famine are still to come. So essentially, I'm getting a little tired. All right. So let's compare both of them now. The cause of all the problems is in both causes two highly similar dreams, which the jealous members of their families interpret, with or without the help of professional dream interpreters, to mean that the key figure is going to rule over his family. All right. In both cases, the members of the family attempt to prevent this prediction coming true by killing the key figure, a measure which is to the reader appears rather radical, right? But ironically, by trying to do this, they 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 create the situation that they were trying to prevent. All right. The key figure is saved in both cases by the intervention of two people, mostly members of the family, who apparently do not act this way out of love for him, but because they do not want his death on their conscience. In both cases, the family relationship is expressly referred to. With Harpagus, the first person causes a temporary reprieve by proposing or ordering the key figure to die from exposure instead of through violence. The second one saves him by causing him to disappear from the view of his enemies. The result is that the key figures come to live in very modest circumstances and remain hidden from their families for many years. Both key figures are said to be beautiful at their time of their disappearance, and both are dressed in a many-colored garment, which is later used to convince their father or their grandfather that they have been killed by wild animals. So both of them are being killed by wild animals. Both receive another name when they finally come to power. Cyrus bore another name at first according to Herodotus and was only later called Cyrus. Joseph received an Egyptian name from Pharaoh. Both are said to be informed by divinity about the future in dreams. And most importantly, both figures are the first to come to power in Egypt and the Lydian capital, respectively, the places where to be the starting point for the two great campaigns. So I see some similarities there. It's quite possible that could be the case. It was dreams that led them both to their situation. If you take into consideration the art of mimesis, this is definitely a possibility. But this has been a fairly long presentation. I hope you have enjoyed it. If anything, you learned about Cyrus, unless you've already known about him. Thanks